Otherwise though, I've got to say I do really like the look of these new KTM 390 Adventure models. They look like a big improvement over the previous generation. The visuals are quite cool too as well, with that high front mudguard and the kind of rally looking front end. And I guess they're going to fit the bill perfectly for this growing market of small to mid capacity bikes, where we've seen loads of new models introduced over the past year or two. Thing is though, are they good enough to go toe to toe with some of the existing bikes on the market? Or is there something better already out there? Well, look, let's take a look through some of the key competitors as well as, their relative strength. I think a great starting point has to be the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, which has only been on the market for about a year now, but already looks like it's proving to be really popular. This one follows on, of course, from the air-cooled Himalayan, which I think it's fair to say is a bit of a cult bike, with a super low price point and a simple spec that offered just enough performance for some no-frills adventure riding. I mean, I say just enough, but it really is by the skin of their teeth, because about 20 horsepower on a 200 kilo bike really does feel quite slow. And so for me, the move to this new liquid-cooled 450 Himalayan was massively needed to keep pace with the market, and it really is a big improvement in terms of usability out on the road. You can more comfortably now perform overtakes at like 60 or 70 miles per hour, and also when you're starting to accelerate out of corners, there's enough there now to make it actually feel, borderline fun, which wasn't necessarily the case with the air-cooled bike. Elsewhere, you've got a really off-road capable chassis, you've got an easygoing riding position with a moderate seat height, the typical Enfield styling job with plenty of vibrant and varying finishes, and also this interesting new round TFT display which maintains a bit of a traditional form factor but actually houses some fairly modern capabilities. So look, this one might not be the most exhilarating bike ever made, and it's not perhaps the best finished when you look at some of the competition, but with a really decent starting price of £5,750, you really can't grumble too much. There is, though, another very good option, and this one comes from one of KTM's manufacturing partners, and that's the 450 MT from CFMoto, which again has been very popular since it was introduced last year. Now, being designed and built out in China means they can keep the cost similarly low, so this one actually comes in a little cheaper at $5,699. And I will say, I think it does offer a little bit more spec and more features than the Enfield, and also some better, more rugged adventure bike looks. You get adjustable suspension with 200mm of travel front and rear. There's spoked tubeless wheels as standard with a 21-inch front and an 18 at the rear. A good standing position with high and wide bars, a TFT dash, an adjustable windscreen. You've got folding foot controls, you've got a bolt-on subframe, so it's all really nicely thought out for adventure-type riding. But I think, for me, more than any of that, it's the engine configuration and the soul and feel that gives it that makes it probably a bit more desirable than the Himalayan. You see, it gets a parallel twin with a 270-degree crank, so it's got a bit of that big bike sound and feel. And so while it isn't really significantly different to the Enfield in terms of actual performance figures, it just feels, to me anyway, it's a little bit personal taste, but it just feels a lot more satisfying to ride. Perhaps one shortcoming is that it is quite choppy on and off the throttle at lower speeds, and that does become more of an issue if you're off-roading, I guess. But ultimately, there's going to be some trade-offs for such a feature-laden bike at that price point, and so I think it can probably be forgiven. Now, I guess you could also count the Honda NX500 in this kind of part of the market, which follows on from the CB500X of years prior, although they have given it, with this new name, also a bit more of an adventure-y look, with stacked headlights at the front and a sort of slim rally-like front end. You do get a 19-inch front for a little bit of off-road ability, but I think overall you've got to say this is really a road-focused bike, with a seat height of 830mm, a relatively low stance and a vulnerable underbelly, and so this one is more so a competitor for the 390 Adventure X than it ever could be for something like the R model. Being a twin with a little bit more capacity as well, the power figures are about as good as it gets in this class, with 47 horsepower peak and 43 newton meters of peak torque, although you will have to pay a little bit more for it, with this one coming in at close to $7,000 actually, at $6,849, so a good chunk more than the 390 Adventure X. Now, I think you could also maybe consider, in this part of the market, the Triumph Scrambler 400X, presuming you don't mind a sort of naked bike, and also if you fancy a bit of a retro look. I guess its biggest strength is probably the engine. The 400 single is a bit of a peach. It's got a really nice, deep and rich soundtrack at the exhaust. It's relatively smooth as well versus some of the competition. But again, I'd say with a lower stance than some of the other bikes in this part of the market, the 19-inch front wheel, and a less natural riding position if you want to stand up. Really, this one is built in the majority for road riding with a little bit of off-road capability as a sort of bonus. So yeah, when you take a look at some of these existing options, I think the KTMs do look really well set. The Adventure R is probably the most aggressive and tall and off-roady spec that you can currently get. The suspension travel at 230mm is really lengthy. It's got the weight as well, which looks to be one of the lowest. And also that tall seat height, I think actually is a bit of a strength because it gives you a proper, purposeful adventure riding position, whereas bikes like the CFMoto and the Royal Enfield are quite a bit lower to kind of balance off-road riding with on-road usability. Thing is though, I will say, if you're not 100% sold on this 390 Adventure right away, then it may well be worth holding off for a bit because there are plenty of other options seemingly on the way from other manufacturers which also look quite off-road biased. One of the most anticipated will be the new F450 GS from BMW, which was first shown at EICMA in Milan last year in November, and it has all the looks of a baby R1300 GS, but hopefully a lot more slender and agile, and also it should come at a fraction of the price too. Still, at the same time as being hopefully quite affordable, it still looks like it gets the proper BMW design and build quality, with their typical switchgear layout and TFT dash, and a chassis that looks really quite well spec'd with an adjustable fork and shock, spoke tubeless wheels, and also braking courtesy of Brembo. Then you'll also get their new 450 parallel twin, which makes a good 47 horsepower peak, and also a unique firing interval of 125 degrees that they say has never been used on a motorcycle before, so that should give it a little bit of a point of differentiation. On top of that, BMW claim it all weighs in at close to the 175 kilograms of the KTM, and so it really does look like a very exciting prospect, this one, although my only question is whether with all those goodies and decent spec, it'll be close enough on price to look competitive versus the CFMoto, the KTM, or whether they'll have to wander over that $7,000 mark. I guess being built out in India by their partners at TVS should probably help to keep the price down, and that's an arrangement they already take advantage of with the 310 models. But look, I guess we'll have to wait till later in the year to find out for sure when the full specs and details are announced, which is, anticipated to be probably around EICMA this year in November again. On top of that though, another 450 has been spied out testing in the form of Aprilia's Touareg 457, which is basically the love child of two already very good bikes. You see, the Touareg 660 is widely regarded as a great option in the middleweight adventure class, with a proper off-roady spec, classy Aprilia styling, and also I'd say plenty of tech and features for the money. The RS457 on the other hand is their budget-friendly A2 sports bike, and when I rode it a couple of months back, I really did enjoy the cracking little parallel twin that again gets a 270-degree crank for that big bike sound and soul. To me, the marriage of the two is a bit of a no-brainer, with a lighter, more affordable Touareg fitting this new class of bikes perfectly, and also the engine not really feeling like a massive step down from the 660, especially if you're riding off-road where the peak power is much less important. On top of those though, Kawasaki have also recently thrown their hat in this ring with a slightly unusual display at EICMA, and also I saw this a couple of weeks later at Motorcycle Live in the UK. Now it's just the front end of a new bike sticking out of a box, but you can tell from the looks of the wheel and the suspension, and to be fair, the branding on the box, if you care to walk around it, that this will be a brand new KLE model. And so it looks like another twin, and this one could be a very decent option indeed. Now, one assumes it will get the same 500 twin as their Z500 Naked and the Ninja 500 sports bike, which is similar in character, I guess, to the Honda engine in the NX 500, with both having a 180-degree crank. So perhaps if for some reason you're a fan of that particular engine configuration, then this one is worth a look, especially if you were considering the NX 500 but wanted something a bit more off-road capable. But look, how do you reckon those KTMs stack up? And is the 390 Adventure R now the one to go for, or would you pick one of the others from this list? Let me know what you think down in the comments.